Good afternoon, everybody on the East Coast. Good morning to everybody further west. We are thrilled to have the second in our series of pre-election webinars for those of you who were able to join us on Monday with Speaker Johnson. Welcome back. For those of you who are joining us for the first time today, we are thrilled to have you. Obviously, we all know how important this election is. And so we want everybody to be as informed and up to date on the current state of politics in America. And we are so fortunate to have, as we affectionately call her, and she affectionately calls herself, our favorite RJC Shiksa, Kellyanne Conway. I can say that because I've only known Kellyanne for almost 40 years. So we love her to death. Obviously, before we start, I did want to make one mention to everybody that our thoughts and prayers with all our family and friends and anybody in harm's way in Florida for what is shaping up to be a horrific storm. So please know that we're thinking of you and thinking of your loved ones and family who may be impacted by what is looking to be a catastrophic storm barreling down on Florida. So with that, just one reminder, our next webinar is going to be next Monday, the 14th of October with Nikki Haley. So mark your calendars and information will be coming out shortly on that. And I know we've got Mike Pompeo coming up, I hope, and some other ones that we will announce shortly. And with that, let me turn the program over to our national chairman, Senator Coleman.
Thanks, Matt. And let me say our thoughts and prayers are also with those who are still being held hostage. We're only 2 days past the anniversary of the brutal massacre, and so in our hearts, in our thoughts, in our prayers, and for all those who've been so terribly impacted. Let me turn to a positive, and that's having Kellyanne Conway with us. Matt, not only is she our favorite RJC Shiksa, we love her, and she loves us. She has, Kellyanne, I just want to say thank you because you have always been there for us. You have always been there for us, and you're such an asset for our cause, for our movement, for our party, for our people, that we deeply appreciate it. So I just wanted to kind of say that up front. Less than a month out to an election. I think you famously said elections are won on votes, not vibes. So do you think hope and joy are not going to prevail on November 5th?
Well, first of all, Norm and Matt, thank you so much for having me, and everyone on the call and everyone who can't make the call who will see the recording or hear about this later on. I want to thank each and every one of you for standing up and showing up and putting up and speaking up, especially at a very fraught time such as this. I did say I was at the Democratic National Convention for Fox News in Chicago, and I heard a lot about vibes coming from the likes of the Obamas and Oprah and the rest of them, the Clintons. Vibes are not votes. And I feel that just in this last couple days, just this last week, that somehow the Kamala campaign thinks her best bet and her greatest deficit is to make her seem more warm and accessible. Would you rather have a beer with her like Stephen Colbert did on television yesterday? Would you invite her to the Yankees or Mets game? Would you? That's not the question before the American people. That this is an unserious person at a very serious, somber, fraught time here and abroad. And so vibes are not votes. You can have historic amount of money raised, which Kamala Harris does. You can have a historic candidacy in the making, which she's able to present. She's able to say, I'll be the first woman of color president of the United States. You can have, again, the Obamas, Oprah, the whole rest of them. But what we don't have is a woman who has performed ably as vice president. If you look at the polls, she went from being the least popular vice president in modern history to the first Democratic nominee to never have won a competitive primary or a single vote in the primaries and to become the putative nominee. That was great at first, but it cost you long term. She's been feasting on two big phrases, whether she says them overtly or she just implies them subtly. The first is, I'm not Biden, which was a huge relief to many millions, tens of millions of Democratic voters and donors and grassroots organizers and elected officials and candidates. And yes, Jewish Americans who have or would tend to vote Democratic, but were getting upset with Joe Biden. So she's able to say, I'm not Biden. That was a big relief. win back some of the core constituencies of the Democratic Party that any Democratic presidential nominee has and must rely upon to be successful. The second thing she's been implying and saying is, I'm not Trump. She's been feasting on, I'm not Biden, I'm not Trump for the 3 months or so she's been the nominee. Why is this important? Well, it's important because she's yet to answer the true question, who is Kamala? So you're not Trump, you're not Biden, but who are you? And every time she tries to answer that, Norm, she goes for the vibes. And she gets the awkward laugh we've all seen, but it's more fundamental than that. It's that her inability to actually exercise the muscle memory of doing interviews or giving speeches or speaking to the press under wing or extemporaneously. She's lacking in all of that as vice president. And so there's very little muscle memory to exercise. And so vibes are not votes. I'll tell you, Trump is doing very well right now because he's back to his 2016 Trump. That schedule looks like it did in 2016 when we didn't have the kind of money he has now, or certainly that Kamala has, where he's just barnstorming and blitzing the swing states, the 22 counties where about the 120,000 to 160,000 truly undecided voters reside. And he is making himself available for traditional media, but also podcasts and town halls and local radio, local print, local television interviews as some of our secret sauce in 2016, free of charge. You can do them backstage when you pull into Harrisburg or Eau Claire or the Detroit suburbs. You can provide those interviews free of charge. And those interviews are typically covered much more fairly and just objectively and almost anodyne in a very anodyne way than, say, the mainstream media interviews. So he's making good use of that. Look, the Obama couple is still very popular. The Obama coalition is long gone. And I wanted to say that demographically for everyone here. President Obama was able to do better than most Democrats do in 2008 among non-college educated households, non-college educated white households. And here comes Trump, and Trump converts 206 counties from Obama to Trump. Biden wins back a bunch of those, and enough of those in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan, adding on Arizona and Georgia to become the president. But I have to say right now, Harris's biggest problem is what we see in everybody's polling, including our own, is that on the one hand, she wants to distance herself from the major decisions of the Biden administration she thinks are not popular: economy and inflation, foreign, quote, engagements, I'll call them wars, and then, of course, in Afghanistan, and then, of course, the border. But she's not able to do that because things like yesterday where she says, I can't think of a single thing I would do differently. And then when pressed, she said she'd have a Republican in her cabinet, as if. So I think Kamala Harris is trying to run out the clock and sit on a lead that I don't think is actually real. Donald Trump is trying to race the clock and reclaim and repossess and represent that hunger, swagger, underdog, underestimated ethos of 2016. These 7 swing states are tighter than a tick, but there's a world in which if the election were held today, I think Trump would win 5 of the 7 swing states, all but Michigan and Wisconsin. They're kind of tight too. It does come down to Pennsylvania. I know you're going to ask about that. I certainly want to talk about that particularly. Last point on this, I want everybody to think about this structurally. My job in polling. President Trump is doing better. I'm going to name 5 groups: Jewish Americans, African Americans, Hispanic Americans, union households, and young people. President Trump need not and will not, is likely not to win a majority of any of those 5 groups. And he can still be the next president of the United States because he's doing better than a typical Republican presidential nominee has done and would do. And he's doing better than Trump himself did in 2016 and even 2020. So this is the whole matter of mitigating, not eliminating, but mitigating the deficits that any Republican presidential nominee would have among those groups. And I'm not saying that because I'm talking to RJC today. Those are the 5 groups I use wherever I go, because he only needs to do better than he's done. And he is doing better than he has done in the past. So Kamala's got back a bunch of those Democratic constituencies. But at this, every day my firm puts out, we have this day in history. So October 9th, 2016, Hillary was beating Trump by about 3.8% nationally. October 9th, 2020, Biden was beating Trump 8.4 8.4% in the Real Clear Politics average of polls nationally. Of course, none of that happened out of 155,500,000 votes cast in 2020, a 10% increase over 2016, mainly because of COVID compelled measures, vote early, vote late, count them late, et cetera. Out of 155,500,000 votes cast, it came down to 44,000 votes in 3 states, Wisconsin, Georgia, and Arizona. So those are still on the list. The Michigan and Pennsylvania that, along with Wisconsin, helped Trump win by 77,000 votes in 2016, still there. And then Nevada's hanging out as a swing state. Republicans have not won it presidentially since 2004. The 6 electoral votes, I believe that Biden would have had to pull out of Nevada because Trump was beating him there handily. He's trying to get back that lead against Kamala Harris. But Nevada is fascinating. I know everybody here spends a lot of time there, including your annual convention. But I'll say this. Nevada is fascinating to me because it was elusive to us in 2016. We made a big play there. It was slipping from us. And I pulled us out as campaign manager in Nevada and New Hampshire later on. And we start spending more time in Michigan and Wisconsin. Certainly, we're already in Pennsylvania. But Nevada is curious because up there with California and DC, it is a state that suffers the highest unemployment rate and still has not bounced back from the post-COVID economic concerns, has very high foreclosure rates, default rates, and it is the only state in our entire country, sadly but truly, that went from a Democratic governor to a Republican governor in 2022 midterms, from Steve Sisolak, the Democrat, to the former sheriff of Clark County and current governor, Joe Lombardo. So we're looking at Nevada also as one of the 7 swing states.
Can we talk a little bit about Pennsylvania? And that is that Biden won by being Scranton Joe. Kamala's not Scranton. She's not Scranton Kamala.
San Francisco Kamala, yeah.
Yeah. And so, look at the firefighters, look at the Teamsters. Talk to me a little bit about kind of where Pennsylvania is at. Where is that working class vote? Give me a little read on that. And
Sure.
Are we going to win Pennsylvania, bottom line?
Yes, if the election were held today, Trump would win Pennsylvania. We just came out of the field for a corporate client this weekend. The field dates were October 4th to 7th, so it was during Butler, Pennsylvania rally. I will say that. We have Dave McCormick, the highest we've ever had him in our polling. We've never had him beating Casey. We have him dead even, about a point ahead. And it is right after Butler, but this is good. I like the momentum. I like the movement. I like the trend lines. We have Trump up 3. We've not had him up 3 in Pennsylvania this entire cycle, including against Biden. And that doesn't mean he'll win by 3. It means that the trends are going in his direction. Norm, there's no question, Matt, in my mind, that Scranton Joe would have been able to rely upon probably the Teamsters endorsement, or maybe a little less of a little more timid, a little less tepid than they were about Kamala Harris. But what happened with the Teamsters is they had done their internal polling before with Biden versus Trump. It was a little bit more split, probably advantage Biden. Now it was 60-34. And so they had no choice but, for the first time in decades, to not endorse a Democratic nominee. So I think Scranton Joe, certainly also Catholic, a very large population of Catholics. And I just think him representing the Delaware Valley, certainly was vice president for 8 years, but he's the guy from, everybody knows his personal stories of tragedy, burying a wife and 2 kids along the way, God forbid. But I think people are more familiar and comfortable with him. She is a San Francisco radical, not Scranton Joe. In addition, she's just gone back and forth on fracking. So even if you don't have a job in fracking, even if energy is not your big thing, as a Pennsylvania, and you look at that and you say, this is one of our bedrock industries in the state, in the Commonwealth. And it reminds me of Hillary Clinton doing us a big solid, a big favor in 2016 by promising, I will put the coal miners out of work. I said, thank you for that free ad. We'll spend our money on something else now. But when you say something like that, I'm going to ban fracking, I'm going to put coal miners out of business, people stiffen their spines. They say, hold on, I'm not even a coal miner. We're not a fracking family, but I care about people who are. So sometimes, and I think this happens with Kamala often, it's not just the direct stakeholders who hear you. It's all what I call the shareholders, the concentric circles around you, people who reside in that area, that region, that media market. Look, I know you've been out front at RJC saying it. I know I went on Jesse Wooders on July 11th, 2 days before the president survived his first assassination attempt, saying, if, President Trump has to be careful who he picks, but if he picks one way or the other, I think, after this debate, they can get rid of Joe Biden, Kamala Harris picks Josh Shapiro, and then Pennsylvania is much more competitive. Little did I know she just literally couldn't do that because he's Jewish, and you guys are out there saying it. I mean, I've got your quotes somewhere. I mean, you basically said he can't do it because he's Jewish, and what a disgrace that is. I want to remind everybody that it's not just on our college campuses that we have this pro-Hamas element. It's in our halls of Congress. There were 31 Democrats in the House of Representatives in the US Congress who voted against a resolution last October 18th, 11 short days after October 7th in Israel. They voted against a resolution essentially to declare Hamas as a terrorist group, something our State Department already does under bipartisan presidents. And they couldn't do that. Two of them have lost their primaries, I think in large part because of the great efforts of the people on this call. But the 29 remain. And I say this because it's one thing for Kamala Harris to be able to blow off, maybe the campus folks, roll the dice and try to run up the totals among white suburban women in Michigan and forget the fact that you got a lot of folks there mad at her. But it's quite another to have in your party elected representatives and all that power and that access to top secret information, God forbid, be Hamas sympathizers. So they've got a big problem in their party. It's particularly her problem. I also wanted to say this about Pennsylvania. Sure, you got the working class voters. Donald Trump absolutely recast the Republican Party into one of the worker. Pennsylvania was our read state in 2016. I was on TV every day saying it. We were in Hershey, Pennsylvania on Friday, November 4th, and I went up to the podium to introduce him and spontaneously said, on Tuesday night, when they call Pennsylvania for Donald Trump, they will call Donald Trump the next president of the United States. I think that we're there again. 20 electoral votes in 2016, 19 now. I think we're there again. And in addition to the non-college educated households that are overwhelmingly supporting President Trump, I would be remiss in not saying we've got 435,000 Jewish Americans living in Pennsylvania, and 75% or so are in the collar counties around Philadelphia. Another example of mitigating, not eliminating. Our strategy, as I used to say on Morning Joe and other places in 2016, our strategy then must be the strategy now, which is you can't eliminate the party deficits in the collar counties. Probably won't win any of the collar counties, maybe, but just can't do as badly as Mitt Romney did. Just can't do as badly as John McCain did. Just can't. And Trump did that in 2016. 3 of the 206 counties he flipped from Obama, Trump were in Pennsylvania. 2 of them flipped back to Biden in 2020. So that's problematic. But I don't see her making a big enough play for Pennsylvania. She seems awkward there. Even the young African-American men in and around Philadelphia, if Trump can get 18, 20% of them, it's game over. The last thing I'll say about Pennsylvania, Norm, and this goes with Matt, this goes with what I'm saying overall about how important it is for us to invest in the non-sexy parts of politics, the ground game, the voter registration, engaging voters, not just enraging voters, educating them, making sure they know where to vote. How is not just for whom philosophically, ideologically, and personally for the candidates. How is also, is it Dropbox? Is it in person at the polls early? Is it in person at the polls on election day? And so the numbers coming out of Pennsylvania and North Carolina, but especially Pennsylvania, are remarkable. The Republicans have cut the Democratic registration advantage in half, from over 600,000 advantage to just about 300,000. That doesn't happen overnight. I just read stats last night. For the first time since they've been doing it this past week, you had more Republicans register new than Democrats register new. It was something like 8,000 and change to 6,000 and change, but it ain't nothing. And it certainly is a break in the trend going the other way. So the energy and enthusiasm, I think, that Trump is able to generate has led to momentum. The energy and enthusiasm that Kamala's been able to generate has led to money. I'd rather be him than her right now. She's got scary money, but this I want to say about money in politics. Look, Hillary Clinton spent 3 to 4 times what we spent in 2016. I think if we had had more money, we would not have been able to run that scrappy, gritty, come from behind effort where we were forced, necessity being the mother I mentioned, forced to do 50% television advertisements, 50% digital advertisements. 2020, Trump's campaign spent $1.6 billion. And God bless him, but I think it proved the old adage to be true. The fastest way to make a small fortune is to have a very large one and waste most of it. A lot of TV ads and not enough digital. So I'm hoping, I hope it's right size this time for the Trump campaign. I'm a big fan of what they're doing. Didn't want to go back there, don't need to. Very helpful to the president where I am. But the Kamala campaign is hemorrhaging dollar after dollar after dollar on television advertisements. And here's my prediction. There are these fine lines in politics, particularly now when most people don't have a traditional television subscription package. They're streaming, they're doing on demand, whatever it is they're doing. They're not staring at the television through their subscription package. There is a fine line between penetration, political advertising being successful at penetration for the voters, and then it's saturation. And at some point it becomes inundation. And boy, those lines between penetration and saturation, the voters start to say, it's a little too much. I heard you the first 40 times. And then you go from saturation to inundation, and they just get pissed off. They say, wow, the first time I saw that ad 10 or 12 times, I was really upset with the subject matter of the ad. I can't believe Trump said that or did that, or I can't believe Dave McCormick believes that, or I can't believe. And then all of a sudden, they say, well, hold on. I'm not mad at the subject matter of the ad. I'm mad at the sponsor of the ad. How stupid do you think I am? And then as goes Pennsylvania, I would be remiss in not calling out or not highlighting the articles that people in Western Pennsylvania and the collar counties around Philadelphia are reading this week as we speak here, Norm, which is that you've got Representative Summer Lee, Mayor Ed Gainey, and Allegheny County Executive Sarah Innamorato issuing a joint statement that their hearts are heavy for Israel, but they also are upset for those who have been massacred in the year since. Our grief is compounded. The violence did not start on October 7th. I mean, they're being attacked for that. And you have a couple officials just outright being attacked for their anti-Semitism. I think Kamala Harris is the worst four-letter word in her life right now is Iran. And we all know President Trump's successes on behalf of the state of Israel and those of and Americans who love and benefit from our Judeo-Christian heritage and values. But in addition to all the accomplishments that we know about, I think the more important focal point right now for undecided voters is, and on the fence Jewish American voters who traditionally or typically might be voting Democrat, is Iran. I interviewed President Trump for an hour plus last week for my new Fox Nation show, Here's the Deal. He sat with me for over an hour. The very first two questions I asked him were about Iran. And that interview aired last Monday, a week ago. And I said to him, President Trump, so we went through the stark contrast between the two records, the two parties' visions on Iran. The Harris White House, which is what I call it, and the Trump White House. I call it the Harris White House because I figure if she can dump Biden, so can we. So the Harris record, the Harris White House, the Harris administration's record on Iran, on Israel, on Hamas. That is the bright line distinction that I think it's incumbent upon everyone on this call to make sure people understand. Iran was flat on its back, striving to do energy deals by the time Trump left. President Trump even said to Xi Jinping, you want to do deals with Iran? You go deal with Iran. That's up to you, China first. But you won't work with the United States on anything. No trade deals, no. So China decided what others decided, which is no deals with Iran. Flat on their backs, takes out Soleimani, obviously, is protecting the state of Israel the entire time, make sure that we're out of the JCPOA and any number of other measures and movements that mattered. These guys get there, and on day 2 or 3, they're delisting the Houthis as terrorists. They're emboldening Hezbollah and Hamas, and so everyone knows what has happened since. But I think going back to the beginning here of how do I see the difference between the two parties, you certainly can do the Trump versus Harris record on Israel. But I think Iran is the real key here so that people understand the clear and present danger that merits them to consider voting a certain way.
You're muted, Norm.
I'm muted. I'm going to say all my questions, I think were answered. I do hope the campaign, I know they're all listening to you. So much wisdom. Two questions. One quick one, and that is vice presidents. Typically, they don't matter. But, you've got a pathological liar You got a Gavin Newsom in a flannel shirt and Tim Walz, and you got J.D. Vance, who was just, I thought, magnificent during that debate. Any impact? How does that play out between now and November 5th?
Norm, I think the vice presidents do matter this time, mainly because people know that Kamala Harris missed a chance to not do what Biden did with her and what Obama did with Biden, which is be bold enough to pick somebody that may upstage you and overperform you once in a while, and that's okay. You're still the person at the top. Doesn't every great CEO want to pick a fabulous CFO and COO and CMO, et cetera? Sure. But she did what Biden did with her, which is let me pick one of three people in the whole country who makes me seem even smarter, can't upstage me. It was a huge mistake. And I think people know, and I would imagine most Jewish Americans who are politically active know, that she passed over the very popular first-term governor and former attorney general. So she should appreciate that. She should have some empathy for and allegiance with a former attorney general, state attorney general like she was in California, Josh Shapiro. It's important for other reasons. I mean, he's better on fracking than your average Democrat, including Tom Wolf. He's better on school choice and charters than your average Democrat, including Tom Wolf, his predecessor as Democratic governor. And so I think the vice president, I think Tim Walz matters because of who he is and because of who he's not. And debate performances are one thing. Obviously, J.D. Vance won that debate. And I don't like winners or losers. I like just who presented themselves in a clear-headed, compelling way so that people who are in doubt or on the fence or hadn't been dialed in and tuned in the way the rest of us might be day in and day out got the answers that they needed or actually are hesitating now about voting Democrat, which they typically do. So that's J.D. Vance. I think President Trump showed the opposite. People say, well, he picked someone who's comfortable with MAGA. And excuse me, if you're President Trump, I know firsthand you don't want to say, I'm passing the baton to this one person for the movement I built. He wants them all to fight it out like scorpions in a bottle, the way he always wanted the staffers to fight in front of him in the Oval Office about something, which I respect because at least we were heard and listened to, even if it didn't follow our advice. So I think Vance knows that he is Donald Trump's number two. He's reflecting what President Trump says, does, believes, and did as president the first time when J.D. Vance wasn't in politics yet, in government yet. And he is reflecting that. Walz is problematic because even if you wanted to look past, even if you said, well, we all misspeak, we all misremember our calendar, it's 35 years ago, so on, even if you wanted to give him grace in that way, what's in it for you beyond that? What does he offer you substantively? He was known as the seventh most bipartisan member of the U.S. Congress when he represented a rural district in Minnesota. And then he becomes the governor of the entire state where you have to represent everyone and loses his mind liberally, goes so far to the left that J.D. Vance and Donald Trump are both right, signed one of the most permissive, outrageous abortion laws in the land to the point where people who call themselves vociferously, deeply pro-choice are offended by it because essentially it's not pro-life, pro-choice. A baby survives an abortion and 8 did, and you have to have it expire. You cannot provide it food, water, warmth. You have to have it expire. Tim Walz did that. Just some of the stuff he's done has been cruel. Some of the stuff Tim Walz has done as governor is just spiteful. And it reminds people of how spiteful the Harris administration has done, killing those Keystone Pipeline jobs on day one, just passing the Inflation Reduction Act and pretending that it's uprooting the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, et cetera. So I think the vice presidents do matter because because these races are so tight and the reflection of the top of the ticket. And Tim Walz is still explaining. I also think Tim Walz was what liberals like San Francisco Kamala think an overweight white guy in the Midwest and upper Rust Belt states looks like, or is. So they have the stereotype all their own. It's like, oh, we have one of those. He's the governor of Minnesota. Let's get him. And then all of a sudden the Teamsters will vote for me. The working class folks will vote. The frackers will vote for me. And it's not panning out that way. It's a bit of a liability.
Well, and I have to say, he let Minneapolis burn for 3 days during the George Floyd riots.
No question. It's the only time
Mhm.
Trump remembers speaking to Governor Walz is when Governor Walz, and I was there for all that, the George Floyd stuff and the COVID pandemic. It's the only time President Trump recalls speaking to Walz, and only time I think they've evidenced through their official records, phone logs, is he called him pleading when after he allowed his cities to burn, which also means, Norm and Matt, we didn't hear much from Walz during COVID. And I think he's another one like Newsom, like that one in New Mexico, Stephanie Grisham, like not Stephanie Grisham, something Grisham. And then the person up in Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer, here are people who they were hiring their own supply of executive power during COVID. Walz is another one. He's another one when you look at what he was doing.
I would say he shut everything down. He was brutal.
They kept the synagogues, churches, and mosques closed. They're opening up the pot shops and the liquor stores.
It was on, and the Archbishop took him on over that. And just one other observation about, he started out as being, bipartisan. In his last reelect on Congress, he won by about 1,500 votes. He started out with an A from the NRA, ended up with an F.
Wow.
In his reelection, as governor, he got 31% of the vote in the most rural 7th congressional district. So those folks who knew him best understood that he's not middle America. He may have been born in some rural community, but his heart and soul is in San Francisco. With Kamala. Let's close this out with the message, final message. Let me just say this, RJC, we're playing around the edges. Okay, what percentage of this vote? We need to increase our totals. We know we can do that. President Trump has afforded us that opportunity. Got over 50% of the Jewish vote in Florida. Did well in Georgia. And so if we can increase the margins, and I think folks are seeing Kamala Harris, she couldn't bring herself to say that she supports the democratically elected Prime Minister of Israel. The other day in 60 Minutes, she didn't show up, refuse her first. She had been nominated, didn't show up when he addressed the bipartisan group in Congress. And our folks are understanding that those folks that we were marching with on Black Lives Matter, on the front line of civil rights, they don't like us. And our kids are at risk. Our kids are being threatened in college campuses by useful idiots who are touting, pro-Hamas slogans. What's the closing message for these folks who are listening here, for their friends, for their relatives, to get the numbers that we need so that we win Pennsylvania, that we win Michigan, that we win the key battleground states?
The closing message is you got to vote like our freedoms and our personal liberties, the survival of Israel, the security, the prosperity, the opportunity in this country depend on it, because it does. And I'm not a big Chicken Little, sky is falling kind of person. The stakes are that high. And I think the question is not, can Donald Trump convince you he's a likable guy? The question is Donald Trump the leader you need for these times? It's not likability, it's leadership. You don't have to invite him for coffee. He's never had a sip in his life. You don't have to date him, marry him, want him as your neighbor, invite him to Thanksgiving. You have to, we're picking a commander in chief and a leader for the free world here. And so we have to vote according to that. And I would say something now, Norm and Matt, that I said probably 8 years ago to the day right after Access Hollywood. We Americans love to complain and kvetch and converse about what offends us. It's so easy to do. Blah, blah, blah here and blah, blah, blah there, all of us. So easy to cite what offends us. We have to vote according to what affects us, not just what offends us. For some people, that's going to be one and the same. And if you're a pro-choice Democrat out there who says, I always vote, I'm pro-choice, I'm a Democrat, I always vote for the Democrat, I believe this and such. This is the year where you're going to vote not just your pocketbook over party, but your conscience, your moral beliefs. And you're going to elevate either Kamala Harris 2019, when she actually ran for president on her own. So we saw the real Kamala Harris, Medicare for all, definitely confused about Israel, nothing big pro-Israel from her there. She was Bernie Sanders without the charm and Elizabeth Warren without the eloquence. So it's Kamala Harris 2019 or Trump 2019, where he'd already done the Golan Heights. He was working on the Abraham Accords. That was in process. He had already returned he had already recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and moved our embassy there, and so on and so forth. And this is important because I'm not a big fan of, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? 4 years ago, as you correctly point out, your beloved home state of Minnesota was on fire and we were dealing with a global pandemic. But 5 years ago, 2019, that's what people have to think about. That's a glimpse into their future. And so I think people can put aside what they don't like and vote according to what they do fear. And whether fear is a motivator or applauding productivity in the presidency between Harris and Trump, whatever the motivation is, I think this is the time to follow the words and the example of Peter Deutsch, former congressman from South Florida. I remember running a race against him years ago. He beat the woman badly, but he said, listen, I agree with the Republicans a little bit more on school choice, et cetera. But he basically said, this is about Israel. And this is about my party not respecting Israel and standing up for what's right. Versus, he said, I'm a lifelong Democrat. He was in the House, I feel like 1993 to 2005, 6 terms. And he's voting for Donald Trump and explained why that is. I think that's incredibly important. It's different than Tulsi Gabbard, different than RFK Jr. Those are great, and those are other reasons. This gets right to the heart of the clear and present persistent danger that Israel is facing, and as our best friend in the region, if not the world, it means we Americans are facing it too.
Kellyanne, we love you. You bring so
I
much
love you
wisdom,
back.
so much wisdom. Maddie, you want to close it out?
Sure. Thank you, Norm. Just picking up one moment on the Peter Deutsch thing, just to share with everybody. He and I have been talking a lot, obviously, over the last several days, and we are excited to utilize him throughout the country to go to Jewish communities in the battleground states and to tell his story. He is willing and able to do anything to help President Trump. He's going to debate, I believe, the head of the Jewish Democrats in some upcoming either in-person debates or webinars, op-eds, traveling around in person. So I definitely agree with Kellyanne that that's a very powerful message, and we're going to take full advantage of it because it goes right to the heart of what our efforts are right now, both turning out our base supporters, but also winning over the persuadables, identifying them and turning them out on election day or early voting. So 27 days, the end is near, but we're going to run through the finish line. Victory is our only option. Kellyanne, thank you for joining us. Always insightful, always learn a lot whenever we're fortunate enough and blessed to have you. I jokingly, as you know, we said at the outset, you're our favorite RJC Shiksa. You're actually mishpucha, your family, you're part of us. And as Norm said, we love you and we're grateful for all you do. Just again, a reminder, Nikki Haley on Monday, more details on future webinars between now and Election Day will be forthcoming. And for everybody, have a easy fast, and we will reconvene after Yom Kippur. So thank you all, and Kellyanne, again, thank you, and thank you, Norm.
Thank you, Kellyanne.
Thank you, everyone. All the best.